Friends, in this year of the birth centenary of Professor K. Kunjuniraja, I would like to highlight his contributions to socio-linguistics. Kunjuniraja was an outstanding scholar of manifold research interest, including literary theory, literary history, historiography, philosophy of language, and linguistics. He had a special fascination for linguistics, and with his scholarship in Sanskrit grammar and Indian philosophical systems like Nyaya and Mimamsa, he could always bridge the gap between ancient and modern disciplines with his insightful inputs. Accordingly, he could interpret ancient Indian theories on meaning in the light of modern developments in linguistics and language philosophy with clarity. It is remarkable that, being engrossed in such philosophical theorizations, Dr. Raja could also find time to analyze linguistic data against the background of society using the tools of sociolinguistics, one of the most important branches of hyphenated forms of modern linguistics. It is well known that there are only a handful of such sociolinguists in the Sanskrit research community, like Professor Madhav Deshpande. It is remarkable that Dr. Raja penned a seminal paper titled Language of Social Hierarchy as early as in 1960, when sociolinguistics was in its infancy. In this paper, Dr. Raja states emphatically the importance of sociolinguistics and sociological approach to language study. Thus, quote, language is a social activity and belongs to an organized and relatively self-sufficient community. It has to be analyzed from a sociological background if it is to be properly understood. Just as the anthropologist studies language as a tool for understanding the cultural pattern of a society, the true linguist must make use of the cultural background of the society in order to understand its language properly. This perception can be seen as a refreshing shift from the approach of generativists and others who tend to bracket off variables like socio-cultural factors from linguistic analysis, branding them as extra linguistic features. For die-hard structuralists and generativists, engagement with variations in usage in language could appear to be confusing and diverting the linguist's attention from the wonderful abstract system that separates language from other communication systems. It's a quotation from Bernard Spolsky. But for Dr. Raja, engagement with structural linguistics did not mean total disregard for complex social realities that determine linguistic usage in specific contexts. A welcome feature of Dr. Raja's sociolinguistic explorations is that he does not confine himself to a particular language, though his focus is on Sanskrit and Malayalam. Instead, he has taken pains to survey a greater amount of linguistic data by extending his investigations to the speech practices of a number of languages, including French, English, Latin, Japanese, Carib, Javanese, German, Italian, Tamil, Portuguese, Spanish, Siamese, Hungarian, and Chinese. This makes his attempt sufficiently broad-based for theorization. In his engagement with sociolinguistic problems, Dr. Raja has investigated how class distinctions in society are reflected in linguistic usage. With regard to the language of social hierarchy, the chosen topic of his investigation, Raja makes only a modest claim that it is only a minor aspect of intimate interconnection between linguistic behavior and social background. Though he rightly points out that it has not received adequate attention from linguists or anthropologists. He points out that the reflection of class distinctions in society in its linguistic behavior is more prominent in certain languages like Malayalam and Japanese than in others, where there are norms only for polite speech. Raja is aware of the fact that social hierarchy is not a static phenomenon and that old linguistic peculiarities based on it are fast disappearing everywhere with the development of democratic ideals of a classless society. Raja refers to the experience of Rip Van Winkle, who had to face estranged glances when he uttered innocently in the post-revolution America, "I am a poor, quiet man, a native of this place, and a loyal subject of the king. God bless him." Socio-political changes could be at times very momentous. In such a situation, such speech reflecting social hierarchy has assumed new guise in the form of polite speech, if it has not disappeared completely. Raja implicitly recognizes the importance of documenting and theorizing such usage by scanning wide range of data scattered in different languages. Dr. Raja identifies Bharada's Natyashastra, especially its 19th chapter, as a mine of information with regard to the dialectic variations based on rank, sex, and locality, and the different modes of address in ancient India. Other texts which he makes use of consist of Smriti texts like Manusmriti and Yajnavalkya Smriti, Valsyayana's Kama Shastra, and literary texts like the Mahabharata, Ramayana, Abhijnana Shakuntala, Kumara Sambhava, and Uttar Ramacharita. Occasionally, Dr. Raja refers to linguistic use attested by playwrights like William Shakespeare and George Bernard Shaw also. Raja refers to the prescription in the Natyashastra as to the mode of address in relation to various characters of different socio-cultural stature. Accordingly, ascetics and teachers are to be addressed as Bhagavan, Brahmin as Arya, a respectable person as Bhava, one of equal status as Marsha or Marisha. Raja lists other forms of address found in the text like Ayushman, Bhadramukha, Aryaputra, Vatsa, Bhavati, Hanje, Bhattini, and Bhartradariye. Dr. Raja also records that such theoretical prescriptions are also matched by the data found in Sanskrit drama. Raja locates the bilingual nature of Sanskrit drama in the wider context of multilingualism prevalent in ancient societies like those of India. Particularly, he refers to the linguistic practice among the tribes like the Caribs. Among the Caribs, the men speak the Caribbean, but women the Arawak language. It may be pointed out that the reason for this anomaly is the fact that Carib men used to kill Arawak men and keep their women as slaves. Raja likens to this practice seen in Sanskrit drama, wherein educated Brahmins and kings and other persons of high status speak Sanskrit, while women and inferior characters speak Prakrit. He seems to have grasped the complexity of the linguistic scenario in Sanskrit plays, as high caste itself is no guarantee for entitlement to Sanskrit. The uneducated Brahmin Vidushaka is a Prakrit speaker there. Similarly, gender itself does not preclude the possibility of a woman talking in Sanskrit. Those educated women ascetics like Pandita Kaushiki speak Sanskrit. The allocation of various types of Prakrit to people of different status is an interesting sociolinguistic issue which has been omitted by Dr. Raja. But we can see discussion of this in Deshpande. Often in Sanskrit literature, we encounter linguistic issues. An interesting passage located by Raja in Ramayana is a self-reflexive statement of Hanuman as to the language he is to use when speaking to Sita. Vacham chodaharishyami manushimiva samskritam yadi vacham pradasyami dijadiriva samskritam Ravanam manyamana mam Sita bhida bhavishyati maya santoyidum shakya nanyatheyam anindita. Here, Hanuman decides upon ordinary human Sanskrit rather than Brahmanical Sanskrit to speak to Sita, as otherwise it could generate suspicion in her that Ravana is talking to her in the guise of Hanuman. One interesting area of survey in Dr. Raja's paper is the sociolinguistic dimensions in the usage of personal pronouns. He points out that the English language started using second person plural like ye and you instead of thee and thou when French politeness was introduced to English in the Middle Ages. You since then has become universal irrespective of social position. To express respect, its genitive and a substantive have to be used as in Your Excellency and Your Lordship. In the French language, the singular tu and the plural vous for second person pose some interesting issues. Ordinarily, tu is used to address a deity at one extreme and servants as well as people of inferior rank and children and very intimate persons at the other extreme. Normally, tu is used in the place of the formal vous outside proper domestic sphere is insulting, but using vous in the place of tu could also be very insulting, as in the case of intimate friends and lovers. Raja quotes Ventris in this regard, who points out that the most violent words that anger and hate can employ admit of certain uses which have been softened and mellowed. Raja humorously concludes, the day one is allowed to address one's friend as tu instead of vous will be a memorable one, especially for lovers. From Raja's study, we can see that there is some decrease in the use of second person singular everywhere, probably due to the democratization the society is undergoing. In Tamil, the singular ni is fast disappearing. In languages like German, Italian and Hindi, the second person singular is replaced by third person plural to express respect. Example, Hindi aap. In Malayalam, there are at least a dozen terms to address a person, suggesting various shades of respect. The Sanskrit Atra Bhavan and Malayalam Avidunna, both indirect references are used in lieu of tum and ningal to show respect. Raja further points out that in Sanskrit, the second person singular tum is generally avoided in speech and substituted by Bhavan, Bhagavan, etc. In this connection, he quotes Manu and Yajnavalkya, who censure the use of Twankara. Another interesting maxim quoted by Raja is that the proper name as well as the personal pronoun Tvam are to be avoided in the case of elders. Twankaram namatheyam cha jeshthanam parivarjayet. He cites the interesting anecdote in the Karna Parvan of Mahabharata, where Krishna advises the furious Arjuna, keen on killing Yudhishthira for the insults heaped on him, to address him instead using the second person singular Tvam. Tvam iti atra bhavantam Tvam bruhi Partha Yudhishtiram. Tomityukto hi nihado Gurur Bhavati Bharata. According to Raja, the usage of honorific titles varies from one society to another. He mentions the fact that there are honorific titles and forms of address still meticulously used in England, like very reverend, reverend, honorable, right honorable, etc. But at the same time, the usage of words like professor and doctor as honorific titles is diminishing in England, though it is continued in many parts of the world. In this connection, Raja recalls the interesting experience of Aldous Huxley, who found, much to his amusement, himself being referred to as professor throughout in his stay in India. Raja records that many of the honorific titles are losing their importance due to their constant use. He lists honorific terms seen in ancient inscriptions and literary works of Malayalam. They include Tiruvilakku, Tiru Amrudu, Tiru Ennai, Neeratupalli, Tiruvullam, etc. Another particular usage is the plural form of the first person for self-reference. Dr. Raja shows that the plurality of royalty as seen in Sanskrit plays like the Abhijnana Shakuntala as the expressions like Ko Vayam, Ko Parokshamanmatho, Mrigashabhai Samam, Ethido Janaha is paralleled by similar practices in other languages like Latin and English. Thus, the king in Shakespeare's Macbeth states, "We will keep ourselves till supper time alone." Possibly in a jocular vein, Raja also records that another group of people who prefer to use first person plural for self-reference are modern editors and journalists who use ourselves to refer to themselves. The other side of the spectrum is forms of politeness. Raja refers to expressions of politeness in some languages which may sound amusing to other language users. For example, the description "your humble servant" was appropriate in English, and the slave says is the norm in Persian. Raja also records that both Siamese and Hungarian have slave for the first person singular. Adiyan in Malayalam and Tamil as well as Padadasa in Sanskrit are their Indian counterparts. Raja has made extensive study of Achara Bhasha, the language of etiquette as practiced in Malayalam and Sanskrit. He rightly points out that self-denigration was an accepted norm in hierarchical societies. The Achara Bhasha was not confined to the upper class of society. It included the deity also. With the system of hypergamy and matrilinear succession prevalent in Kerala, even the wife and children of a Raja or Nambudiri, often belonging to a lower strata in the social hierarchy, had to use the Achara Bhasha in their daily life. Raja points out that this elaborate language etiquette does not seem to have existed even in Japan with such a strictness as seen in Kerala. According to Raja, in the languages used in hierarchical societies, there were two sets of terms, one used for the servant's affairs and another for those of the master. Servant and master refer only to the social position and caste to which they belong, and not to their economic position. Raja also mentions the fact that the social changes towards democratization are taking at rapid speed and that many of the customs are fast disappearing. However, it is also a fact that the custom is a part of history and is reflected in literary works, including those written even in the 20th century. In Achara Bhasha as practiced in Kerala, the servant was supposed to answer with the term Eran, king, and Adiyan, servant. The former was popular in the north and the latter in the south. The term Vidakolluga, meaning to get your permission, was used on many formal occasions. Accordingly, Adiyan Vidakollam could mean anything like I shall stay, I shall go, and I shall come. Food, dwelling place, travel, and even death were represented in two different ways in languages like Malayalam as a part of this etiquette. In the house of the inferior person was always supposed to be referred to as Kuppada Kuppamadam, the hut in the gutter, and the term to be used in the case of the master's dwelling place depended on his caste, like Mana for Nambudhiris and Kovilagam for princess. The servant should refer to the master's food as Amrita or Amrideta, ambrosia, to his own as Karikadi, dirty rice water. The paddy used by the person of inferior stature was Nelpadir, chaff, rice as Kallari, rice full of stones, and salt as Manalaharam, sand food. Terms like Kapi Amrideta came to be included to account for new items. Raja demonstrates how this method of denigrating oneself and one's own possession and venerating the addressed person and his possession is also seen in Japanese language and the Chinese language. Ajara Bhasha is used in religious sects like those of Vaishnavites, wherein the deity and the devotees have a master-slave relationship. Everything related to the deity is referred to with the honorific prefix Thiru. The food of the deity is Amudu, ambrosia. The temple Thirukoil and festival Thiruvilayadal. The Lord's sleeping room is Thiruppalliyarai and his taking food is Amudu Saidal. This tradition is extended by them even in the sphere of daily life. Let me conclude with the passing reference to Dr. Raja's contribution of our understanding of the usage of Sanskrit in the different parts of the vast subcontinent, that is India. Each and every part of the country has its own tradition of pronunciation, and each province boasts of the purity of its own. Raja explores the myth of the pristine purity of Kerala pronunciation and shows that Kerala has developed its own regional peculiarities, as in the pronunciation of A as A as in Jayam instead of Jayam, and nasal conjunctions like Nd and J as N and Nya respectively, like Anyanam, Chandanam, etc. instead of Anjanam and Chandanam. Many such features may be actually mother tongue pull, such as we experience in regional pronunciation of English in India. What is more important is the readiness on the part of linguists not to succumb to regional chauvinism and to analyze data with a scientific spirit. Kunjuni Raja has amply demonstrated that he has this quality in adequate measure as a sociolinguist, and one hopes that this will be emulated by language scholars all over India. Thank you very much.